A dad went to say great night to his 7-year-old child, very well knowing that on the off chance that he didn't, his child would experience difficulty resting. It was a daily, everyday practice between them. He went into the faintly lit room where his child held up under his cover. Be totally sure. He appeared to be identical, yet had a smile that attracted from one ear to another. "You all right, pal?" the dad inquired. The child gestured, still with the smile, prior to saying, "Daddy, check for beasts under my bed." The dad laughed a piece prior to kneeling down to check just to fulfill his child. There, under the bed, pale and apprehensive, was his child. His genuine child. He murmured, "Daddy, there's somebody on my bed."
An explorer chose to go on a climb without anyone else. Something he was not extremely used to. The entire day was ordinary. Trees and hedges inundated his environmental elements. He appreciated being outside in the mountains. Nothing appeared to be bizarre to him, that was until he was advancing back to his vehicle. He calculated an 8-hour climb was adequate. The sky was at that point getting dull and he expected to get back, quick. What was odd was the amount he didn't perceive the path back. He started to overreact. Night had proactively dominated, and the sum total of what he had was an electric lamp and no sign on the most proficient method to get back. He realized it was at that point past the point of no return and excessively hazardous to continue onward through the dangerous woodland. He started to stress that he would have no sanctuary for the night when, fortunately enough, he coincidentally found a separated lodge. It was dull, and seemed like nobody had visited it in years. However, he realized it was the main spot where he could rest until sunshine, particularly since his electric lamp was running out of battery. He thumped on the entryway a couple of times, however nobody replied, so he let himself in where, surprisingly, an ideal bed fitted for one individual looked for him in the middle. That's what he knew. Whether the proprietor returned, he could account for himself. He was certain that the proprietor wouldn't see any problems, or was even most likely dead. So he felt free to get himself familiar in bed. As he attempted to rest, he was unable to overlook the assortment of works of art around the room, representations of weird-looking individuals all looking at him, each wearing a grin that creeped him out. Not excessively lengthy after his weariness from the climb defeated him, and he had the option to disregard the countenances. The next morning he got up early and was shocked to see that there were no paintings around the room, but the windows.
A doctor was working at a hospital where the patients were tagged with colored bands. Green, alive. Red, deceased. One night, the doctor was instructed to get a few supplies from the basement of the hospital, and so he headed to the lift. The lift doors opened and there was a patient inside, minding her own business. Patients were allowed to roam around the hospital to stretch, especially those who have stayed long. The rule was to be back in their rooms before 10. The doctor smiled at the patient before pressing the number for the basement. He found it unusual that the woman didn't have a button already pressed. He wondered if she was heading to the basement too. The lift finally reached the floor where the doors opened. In the distance, a man was limping towards the elevator, and in a panic the doctor slammed the elevator button to close. It finally did, and the lift began to ascend back up, the doctor's heart pounding. "Why did you do that?" "He was trying to use the lift," the woman stated, annoyed. "Did you see his wrist?" The doctor asked. "It was red. He died last night." "I would know because I did his surgery." The woman lifted her wrist. "He saw red." She smiled. "Like this one?"
A man just moved into an apartment and heads to the receptionist to get his keys. The receptionist gave him the key with a smile but warns him not to disturb the door with no number on his floor. He wondered why but didn't bother to ask. He was too busy with his new apartment to care. After he finished unpacking, he began to get curious. He questioned why the receptionist would warn him of such things, and so he stepped out of his apartment to check the door with no number. He tried the door knob first, but it was locked, so instead he got onto his knees and peeked through the keyhole. The apartment he was looking into was empty. His eyes scanned the whole place before stopping at a woman, standing face against a wall, in the corner. He noticed her pale skin and long black hair before stepping back, suddenly feeling perverted in a way for invading someone else's privacy. He brushed it off, assuming she was someone that did not want to be disturbed. The next day he got more curious about the woman and eventually went back, straight away getting onto his knees. He peeked through the keyhole and saw all red. Red. He assumed that the pale woman must have caught him peeking the last time and covered the hole with something red. He left the door alone and instead went down to the receptionist to ask her questions. The receptionist sighed and asked, "You looked through the keyhole, didn't you?" He admitted to it, and so she felt obliged to tell him the story. She told him that a couple used to live in that apartment a long time ago, but the husband went crazy and killed his wife. However, this couple wasn't normal. They had pale skin, black hair, and red eyes.